Sam, welcome to the Technik Museum in Speyer.
Yeah, thank you, Gerhard.
I'm absolutely happy that you are here. And we are sitting here in the flight deck of our Buran OKGLI, the counterpart of Enterprise. And you flew 3 shuttle missions. How does it look for you here?
Well, it looks remarkably similar in that regard in terms of the external. The interior instruments, of course, are a little bit different. I see that, but you know what I think as I was sitting here thinking about here where we are, and in my background as an Army officer, as a West Point cadet, where I started my career. If somebody had told me that I'd be sitting in a Russian Buran
space shuttle,
space shuttle in 1975, 1976, when I was attending the military academy, I would have told them they were crazy. But here we are.
Yeah. What made you decide to apply for NASA's 11th astronaut group?
Well, I think just like, most young people my generation, we aspired to 3 careers. We want to be policemen, firemen, or astronauts. I mean, I grew up during Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. I was inspired by the first, astronauts and watching the whole, Apollo missions, which was obviously historical, and always kind of wanted to fly as a young man. And when I got into the military, I realized that, that was maybe within my grasp. And so I always felt like, I wanted jobs that made a difference in people's lives. And of course, this has given me the opportunity to do that in a big way.
In June 1985, you were selected for the 11th astronaut group. And afterwards, you began basic training. And a few months later, on January 28, 1986, the Challenger accident happened. How did this change anything on you? Because you were already as an ASCAN, an astronaut candidate training. Did you think to resign or what was the situation?
Well, first of all, as you can imagine, it was a terrible day in NASA's history. It was a shocking event. I don't think that the agency was ready for a catastrophic failure. I think that we felt that maybe we'll have an engine failure, we'll do a transatlantic abort, or maybe abort once around. But nobody had, I don't think, anticipated the catastrophic failure. So it shocked the agency to its core. Having said that, I think that it made the astronaut corps more resolved to find out what caused the problem, what happened, how do we fix it, and how do we move on. I think we owed that to the crew. I think that, President Reagan at the time asked the appropriate question: should this spacecraft ever fly again? Asked and answered. He said yes, and appropriated monies for Endeavor. And of course, then the program, continued. So I think we're just more resolved to continue the program. I think, like I said, we owed it to the crew. One of the difficulties of the recovery of the Challenger accident was we went beyond honoring the crew, and we almost martyred the crew. And anytime you have that emotion, it takes a lot to recover from that. But we did, and flew another 100 flights past.
What tasks did you have to perform as a mission specialist in the middeck during launch and flight deck during landing on board Columbia on your first mission, STS-38, in 1990?
Sure. So on that mission, I was mission specialist 3. So I was one of the entry engineers. So we have MS-1 who does the ascent engineering role, plays the ascent engineering role. Mission specialist 2 is kind of the lead engineer, and then mission specialist 3 swaps places with MS-1 for the return. So entry engineer. So our job is primarily to monitor the systems, make sure that we understand the failures and the next failure mode. If, for example, we have a system failure, our job is to kind of bookkeep that and make sure we understand that if we have another failure, what does that mean to the crew? What does that mean to the success of the mission? And what do we have to do to recover from that?
On your second and third missions aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery and on Columbia, you were seated behind the commander and pilot on the flight deck during launch. in this position here, once as a mission specialist 3, MS3, and one as MS4. What are the differences between MS3 and MS4?
So I was actually MS1 on Discovery, which is the ascent engineer, sits right back here. And then on the lead on MS2 on STS-62, which, as you correctly point out, is in the center seat. So the MS2's position is to keep, again, the crew on the timeline. One of the aspects that's absolutely critical, the commander sits in the left seat. He or she is responsible for spacecraft control and leading the team. And so the pilot in the right seat has most of the critical systems that require immediate action on the part of the crew during ascent and reentry. And MS2, our job is to, again, kind of be that third set of eyeballs to monitor the systems, make sure that our abort boundaries are understood, where we are in the trajectory, both during ascent, where we are in space and time during reentry.
To keep an eye on the whole system.
Absolutely. And to keep people on the timeline. And that becomes particularly important if you start to have failures, right? Because there are certain things in the software that are only able to accomplish in the ascent software load, for example, Ops 1, the critical phase being the closing of the external tank doors. So, for example, if you had an abort and you didn't actually get those doors moving prior to transitioning the software, well, you couldn't move them in the reentry software. So it was a loss of mission, catastrophic failure. So our job is to make sure that those kinds of things are not missed, right? As the pilot and the commander get busy with emergencies and other nominal procedures.
After 8 minutes and 30 seconds, the space shuttle reached Earth orbit. Describe how you experienced the flight into space on the middeck and on the flight deck, from ignition of the SSME's booster ignition liftoff and the flight phases from SRB SEP to MECO.
Sure. So the first aspect of that, of course, is when you're sitting on the launch pad 7 seconds before liftoff. Those main engines come up to speed, and you're still bolted to the ground, right? That whole vehicle's just shaking, and it rocks slightly forward. And when those solid rocket boosters kick, it's just a kick in the seat of the pants, right? It's exhilarating. It's an exciting time to be on board the spacecraft, and that's going to continue. That kind of rough ride is going to continue while you're on the solid rocket boosters. At 2 minutes and 5 seconds, as you know, they're jettisoned, and then it smooths out. It's almost like riding an electric train. It's a very smooth ride to orbit. A little bit of a pogo effect going uphill, depending on the weight of the spacecraft and some other things. But and then, of course, at main engine cutoff, you just float free. Engines shut off, and it's an instantaneous loss of acceleration. And now you went from a, close to a 3G environment to zero gravity. And so I've seen everybody react in different ways to that. Some people, when they get to that stage, they'll grab a sandwich and have a snack. Others get violently sick. So it goes across the board.
After MECO, you are still strapped in the seat with seat belts. How do you experience weightlessness? Okay, you see maybe floating a pan or so, but how is it with your body when you're like in Germany? I weigh 84 kilograms and it's immediately zero. Yeah?
Sure. Yeah, and it's just that. I mean, you kind of float up in the seat against your seat belt. Your arms, your legs, you'll see those, kind of float. And one of the things that crews complain of a little bit is their stomachs, will be somewhat sore, the next day, because the body wants to kind of float out and assume a natural position, and we're still in the seat and trying to maintain that position. So the first 24 hours, we try and maintain what we call a 1G orientation. In other words, up is up, down is down, front. We don't flip upside down and do a lot of gymnastics that first day, just to keep from getting sick, right? We don't want to provoke you.
As a mission specialist, tell me 1 or 2 tasks you have to do beside the liftoff and landing procedures.
Yeah, sure. So as a mission specialist, we're going to do most of the science and most of the payload activities. So, for example, on STS-38, which is a classified mission, we can't talk about the details of that, but we do acknowledge that we did have a deployable payload. So, your first activities are making sure that everything is operational, that all your communications and anything else associated with that payload is operational before you release. Same thing on STS-48. We had the upper atmosphere research satellite. That was one that was pulled out of the payload bay and released off of the remote manipulator arm. And then, finally on STS-62, that was mostly remote science in the payload bay. So most of the activities for the flight crew, our science was inside on the mid-deck primarily. We did the mid-deck zero gravity dynamics experiment, for example, which is kind of a precursor to the International Space Station build. We did a number of protein crystal growth experiments. Those are the kinds of things, and medical experiments on our own bodies.
Mm-hmm. We are sitting here in the flight deck of the Soviet Space Shuttle Buran, OKGLI, the counterpart of the US Space Shuttle Enterprise OB-101. During your 3 missions, you flew in the flight deck twice during launch and landing. Does it bring any memories for you? The difference here is we have ejection seats, yes, like we had on Columbia for the first 4 flights, the OFT flights, but back then we had typically normally seats.
Sure. No, I mean, this is very familiar territory. I mean, the configuration, speed brakes, throttles, instrumentation, center console, it's very similar. Some of the instruments, again, position indicators and other things are very, very similar, very common. Overhead panels. It's of course on the shuttles we had over the pilot and the commander seats. We had a number of panels, system panels that aren't on here, obviously, because those systems are not installed. The general purpose computers, the basically the propulsion systems, electrical power distribution systems, and propellants and those kinds of things. But this is all very familiar territory. Brings back great memories.
On the space shuttles like Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour, they flew into space, and this is the reason why there were many more instruments, because you had to put a rocket into a living spacecraft, yes, in Earth orbit. Yeah. So describe 1 or 2 major challenges and what were the most exciting experiences during your 3 missions. Maybe some funny things or some surprising things.
Sure. Well, I think, the most challenging systems, I think, on board the spacecraft, that for me, learning the systems was the general purpose computers, the brains of the spacecraft. Because we have 5 computers all running in unison, 4 of them actually running in unison, 1 running in backup mode. So learning that system and how it controls everything is a bit of a challenge. And the electrical power distribution system, very complex system, lots of potential for failure, and some of those failures are very insidious. They're hard to detect, they're hard to troubleshoot, and so those systems are always a challenge. In terms of the exciting, times, fortunately for us, most of our missions went very well. We had a few failures, for example,
minor ones,
environmental control systems, and that was just a matter of flipping a switch and going to a backup system. We had one more critical failure, which was a disconnect of a fuel cell. And fortunately, the pilot was actually seated at the time that happened, so he was very quickly able to react to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the reason that's a critical failure is you have about 15 seconds to correct that, or you risk losing that fuel cell. And so if you lose that fuel cell, now you're in middle of duration mission. Yep, you have
some fuel cells, and they have to be active.
Have all active, or you're going to shorten the mission.
Yeah, this happened on STS-83. You
Correct.
have to come back 3 days after launch.
Yeah, because you can't afford a second failure, right? The spacecraft will operate with a second failure, but again, it's in a disabled mode, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's a critical failure. The most exciting things, I think, and the most memorable aspects of flying in space are just literally watching the world go by.
The Earth, yeah.
Just continent after continent after continent slowly fade in the distance. And that's, I think, what astronauts remember most and most fondly.
At 8 kilometers a second, yeah, and 90 minutes going once around.
Right. Well, Mike Mullane pointed out, and I've used this analogy often, is that for every beat of your heart, you're going 8 kilometers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is your first time, so your first visit to the Apollo and Beyond space exhibition here at the Technik Museum Speyer. Your classmates from 1985, Mike Baker, Tom Hendricks, and Linda Godwin were already here. What do you like here on the exhibition especially?
Well, I think that what's incredible about this is the access and the displays. I mean, the number of aircraft and the number of items that you have on display here, and the authenticity of the displays. I mean, again, here we are in Buran. You're the only place in the world that's possible.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
This is the only place.
Sitting in a flight deck of a space shuttle.
That's right. And the level of access, the platforms that you have to access all the displays, to give people a close-up view. And again, you know, when you look at the depth and the breadth of all your displays, the transportation, kind of the trains out there, the motorcycles, the cars, the spacecraft, the aircraft, it's a very impressive museum.
Mm-hmm. You know many space museums worldwide. How would you categorize the space exhibition Apollo and Beyond here at the Technik Museum Speyer? Because when we opened it in October 2008, we became the biggest space exhibition for human spaceflight in Europe, not only in Germany.
Sure. Well, again, I'm going to get in trouble here for this, but I don't know that in my opinion, this surpasses any of the museums that I've seen, including some of the Smithsonian exhibits. Now, they're different, right? But they're different in a way that this one is different just because of the depth and the breadth of the exhibits here. Mm-hmm. I think it surpasses anything I've seen. I mean, there's beautiful museums. I encourage people to go. Seattle has a wonderful museum. Yeah. Pensacola has a wonderful museum. Washington has wonderful museums. But nothing that I've seen compares in terms of its breadth.
Yeah, but in the US, you are a space country. You have about 300 astronauts. You have now 4 orbiters on display. You have all the capsules from Mercury, Germany, Apollo. And Germany is not a space country.
No, that's right.
We have only 12 men flown in space, and since April this year, the first woman. Yeah, and I think this is very unique for me, what we have here in Europe.
Oh no, absolutely, and for all of those reasons, it's a bit uncommon, if you will, to see a museum like of this quality, mm-hmm. Given the history.
Mm-hmm. This afternoon, you gave a lecture about your career and your space shuttle missions. In your opinion, what is important for you? Why you do so many lectures with your life experience, professional?
Well, I think a couple things. One is I see that, those presentations as an opportunity to both educate and to entertain, right? To do a little bit of both, but hopefully to inspire as well future generations of space explorers, and not just to inspire, but to give people a sense of the history that they've lived and their contributions. Because certainly the astronauts are the most visible, but we're not the only players here in the arena. Mm-hmm. I mean, tens of thousands of people come together to make these programs work. Mm-hmm. And again, in equal number.
You are the tip of the iceberg.
That's right. We fly the pointy end of the spear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the real work is done in the background.
Yeah.
And not just people that are directly involved, but people like yourself and others that put these quality exhibits and bring this to life for people everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's an important aspect of it.
Thank you very much, Sam, for the great interview and for your visit at the Technik Museum Speyer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invite.